Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Professor Adie Jumbo. I am your host this afternoon or this evening if you are calling in from Nigeria or maybe a different part of the world where you are sometime is morning. It's my pleasure to be your host this afternoon, and also have the pleasure to have Mr. Taiye Lambo, who is going to walk us through this incredible topic that is just inevitable. It's something that we need to really take serious. And I welcome every one of you to this incredible discussion this afternoon. Talking from the U.S., from the East Coast area. So welcome, Mr. Lambo. Please take it on and quickly introduce yourself to our guest.
Welcome, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Jumbo, for sharing this platform with me. I'm really, really excited about this very topical and timely issue and having this discussion, which I think is very timely. So thank you so much. I did this just to give everybody an idea of how this conversation started. A few weeks ago, I called into Dr. Jumbo's show, typically held at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturdays here in the U.S., called Adie Talk. And her topic was safety. And I shared my perspective about why safety is very, very important, especially in the Nigerian context, and some of the solutions that we really have to start thinking about to pretty much be able to control our own destiny, from a safety and security standpoint. So that's really how it all started. But a little bit about me: born and raised in Nigeria. I left Nigeria at 21, and I've been in diaspora now over almost 34 years. I'd say roughly 33 years. And for about half of that time, I've been really laser focused on how can we address these problems? How can we make sure that we're part of the solution, rather than being part of the problem problem that really plagues our beloved country. So that's really how the conversation started. My background is in IT. I've been in IT over 3 decades, and I've also been in cybersecurity, initially called information security, now cybersecurity, almost 3 decades. So I think I can confidently speak about that area, but I also see a lot of overlaps between the cybersecurity world and the physical security world. So I think that's a topic I'm also qualified to speak about. So this presentation is probably going to be about 25 to 30 minutes. And then I would really love to hear from you all and maybe just have an open discussion, maybe in the form of a Q&A after we've concluded or I've finished presenting. So if you can see what I'm sharing, please give me a thumbs up, just to make sure that you can see it. Just some etiquette, rules. I'll say just mute if you're not speaking. Just make sure you mute your microphone so you don't interrupt the discussion or the presentation. So let's talk about this vision. So everything in life starts with having a vision. What I'm really trying to do with this webinar is to pretty much cast a vision that I feel like we all, as Nigerians, I'm going to assume most of us are from Nigeria or we have Nigerian ancestry. So we all have skin in the game. We all have a role. We all have a part, whether positive or negative, to play in our destiny as a nation. So this vision that I have, I would love to share with you, and I would also love to get your buy-in and your advocacy, for this vision. So it's really more of a vision casting presentation. So what I envision is a situation or a world in Nigeria where we have a ring of security cameras around Nigeria to empower us as Nigerians to secure our own future. So that's pretty much the gist of my 25 minutes or so presentation. So the areas I'm going to cover is basically why we have a surveillance desert. So we have surveillance deserts in Nigeria, the why, what it is, and maybe how we can overcome those deserts, surveillance deserts. So again, please mute if you're not speaking. For folks that are joining us, thank you for joining and welcome. And the ultimate solution is to fix this gap or resolve this gap. And the vision is to deploy 10 million low-cost do-it-yourself cameras across the entire country in Nigeria, whether it's the rural areas or the urban areas, and ultimately be able to create jobs for 3.3 million youth in Nigeria, potentially, and to be able to leverage the inflow of funds coming in from us, most of us in diaspora, to be able to achieve that vision. But obviously with that vision comes maybe privacy issues that we need to make sure that we're on top of, from a Nigerian Data Protection Act compliance standpoint. And I envision this being a phased approach, which I'm going to be talking about, in the subsequent slides. Okay. So let's talk about the problem. I'm not going to spend too much time, talking about the problem, or would at least identify what the problem is. So the problem is we have faceless threats. We also have nameless victims. So if you cast your mind back to the Chibok girls, back in 2014, this is probably the first time in our history as a country where victims' names, and in some cases maybe photographs, were shared with the public to be able to say that there's actually human beings behind these statistics, human beings behind this real world crisis. I probably should have started with a disclaimer, so I'm going to read the disclaimer now just to make my lawyers happy. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are mine and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of my former and current employers, clients, or affiliates. The assumptions made by me are not reflective of the position of any organization or government entity. So in other words, these are my own personal opinion. I'm not representing any government, whether I'm serving as an advisor or I'm a consultant to them. I'm not representing their opinion. I'm purely speaking as a human being and as a fellow Nigerian that is concerned by the insecurity in our homeland. So that's really where my perspective stems from. I'm also not speaking with any bias, whether it's ethnic bias, religious bias, political bias, or social bias, or any other type of bias. So I just really have to state that so you can know where I'm coming from. All right, so crimes in Nigeria often lack what we call actionable evidence. And when you don't have actionable evidence, it's very hard to solve the crime. So that's why, as a country, we have very low case clearance rates for crimes. That's the number one issue. We lack, in some cases, we may have visual evidence, but maybe the evidence has been compromised and it's no longer admissible in court, right? So that's part of the issue. The other challenge is affordability, the power reliability, the data network quality of service. We all know. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Drop calls, internet outage. We all know about those problems. And then we also now have governance gaps that creates what we call surveillance deserts. And what are surveillance deserts? These are areas of the country that don't have coverage from a CCTV or even private security camera standpoint. And then we also have the absence of national camera density targets. So there's no national target to say, okay, for every 100 people in Nigeria, for a population of 230 plus million, we want one camera per 100 people, or 5 cameras per 100 people, or 10 cameras, or 15 per 100 people. We don't have those types of targets in Nigeria. And in most cases, we're relying on very, very incomplete stats, even when we're trying to compare ourselves to maybe other African countries that are pretty much more applicable, to the Nigerian context. So the next thing is, if you kind of do a global comparison, without trying to compare apples to oranges, because every country is different. Nigeria is very, very unique. amongst many countries. So without trying to compare apples to oranges, just make sure my screen sharing hasn't gone haywire. So guys, I just clicked something that may have messed up my screen sharing. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes, it's we can see it.
Okay, I'm trying to compare apples to oranges. Let's look at some of the stats for the countries that we typically compare ourselves against. For every time that I hear, oh, in other climes, this is what they do. I hear it on Channels TV or any other TV stations in Nigeria. I just shake my head because I'm like, you realize some of these places have been built over thousands of years, or at least a few hundred years, including the United States. So the US benchmark is 15.3 cameras to 100 people. So just think about that for a minute. For China, it's 14.4 to 100 people. So the US actually has the highest ratio. The UK has 7.5 to 100. Germany, okay. Do you mind muting folks? Professor Jumbo, that's very, very distracting for me. Okay. Germany has 6.3 to 100 people. Netherlands has 5.8 to 100 people. Okay, so we're not the US, we're not China, we're not the UK, we're not Germany, we're not the Netherlands, right? So I get it. Where should we be in terms of our own ratio? I guess it depends, right? The challenge is we don't have a reliable national CCTV data set to be able to determine where we really want to be. And most published metrics, even across Africa, are city level. So using global benchmarks, especially global city benchmarks, may not be a fair way of assessing where we need to be. The policy target, in my opinion, should be at the minimum 5 cameras to 100 people. And that's really how we came up with the goal of potentially 10 million cameras in private hands, separate from public CCTV, in private hands, and then facing this by population as well as the risk. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we proceed. So why do we have this surveillance desert? Why did this surveillance desert form in the Nigerian context? Affordability, I mentioned that earlier on. It's not just the cost of buying the device, it's the cost of installing, especially with the Naira rates, Naira to dollar rate being so high. It's the cost of paying for data and actually making sure you're getting what you're paying for, quality of service. It's the storage cost. We still don't have a lot of local cloud options. So we still have to default to, cloud services in the Western world for the most part, or in Eastern Europe. Power, that's still a problem that has plagued us for decades, and we still have that problem. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still bad. So it's intermittent electricity, uptime challenges, and all these problems are kind of related. If there's insecurity, there's probably more volatility, for the locations, the substations, the different sites, telco platforms have for the towers and stuff like that. So they may actually lose a site because of insecurity. It could be somebody stole something, somebody stole these batteries that are so expensive, and then suddenly the mast goes down. So a lot of these problems are still connected to insecurity. So uptime challenges. The good news is in this day and age, there are options. There are solar options, there are hybrid options. And then let's talk about the quality of service issue. 15 years ago, when I first started this journey of just maybe thinking, researching, developing, implementing, architecting solutions around this, the biggest challenge was quality of service. The Nigerian Communication Commission, I think that's what NCC is called, defined broadband as 1.5 megs. So think about that, 1.5 megs. In the past 5 years, they've defined it as 10 megs to 25 megs. Great, that's a big leap. Guess what? In the US, it's probably 100 megs. So I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges, but you see, it's a moving target, right? But, I welcome the fact that now they realize 1.5 meg is no longer broadband. We need something more. We have social media, we have AI, we have cloud services, we have a bigger demand, right, for quality of service and especially faster broadband, more reliable, more, faster broadband. And then we also have the oversight issues, privacy, retention, data access control, etc. So these are issues that we definitely have to address, or we have to figure out ways to minimize these issues. So the cost of inaction is where we are today. There's low deterrence, there's slower investigations, and all these things result in social and economic cost. One of the social costs is the Jackpot syndrome, right? We have a huge brain drain. Well, most of us that are in diaspora are really part of that problem, right? We left for economic reasons, in some cases, security, social safety, etc. But most of us left for economic reasons and just finding more opportunities. So those things are costing the country because we have a brain drain, a major brain drain problem. We're also eroding global trust. So I'm not going to get into the politics. We all know what the US president said about Nigeria a few weekends ago, and we know how much of a firestorm it's created across the world. We also have issues with public trust and willingness to report crime. Ultimately, what we're missing on is the opportunity for our youth. Our youth population is probably one of the youngest from my research in the world, creating real opportunities for them to actually help turn this problem into a solution. So I'm going to be talking about that in a minute. Actually, that's the next slide. So part of the vision is if we can end up with 10 million cameras in private hands, we could actually create a situation where one youth apprentice could manage 3 cameras, say 3.33. So potentially we're creating 3.3 million paid apprentices at full scale, and we could take a phased approach. And if you look at what that really means, now we're empowering our youth not only to be productive, but to contribute to the society and to help solve a major pain point that is holding us back. But now we have youth that can actually earn a living. They don't have to depend on handout. They don't have to depend on, distant family members that, have maybe a little bit more resources than them. They actually have a shot at helping to rebuild our beloved country. This youth could be incentivized based on, stipends. They could be paid stipends. So I almost see them like NYSC, National Youth Service Corps members, where they're actually making a living by providing this monitoring services to these cameras. And obviously the vetting process, we could also talk about that as well. How do you vet this youth to make sure that they're trustworthy? So the vision is to roll out this in 4 phases. The first phase, in my mind, starts with Lagos and Abuja. 50,000 cameras in Lagos, average cost of $50 per DIY camera. You're looking at a $2.5 million investment. You're looking at 15,000 apprentices and potentially 2 monitoring centers, privately held, privately owned monitoring centers, not government owned. We love the government, but I think for some of us that are in diaspora, we know where the real action is in the private sector. Critical infrastructure in the US is probably 80% private sector run and operated, owned and operated. We've seen the same thing in other Western countries and even in places like China as well. Phase 2 would be 6 zones outside of Lagos and Abuja, and potentially 3 million cameras in private hands. And I'm talking not sophisticated CCTV systems. I'm talking basic cameras that people like me can literally go into a store in the US and buy it for $50. That's the kind of solution I'm talking about. and doesn't require much expertise to be able to deploy and to be able to monitor, but it actually creates an opportunity to employ our youth to be part of the solution. So with the 6 zones actually joining or getting onboarded, potentially now we have 900,000, almost a million apprentices, and at the cost, capital expense of $150 million. So you're probably thinking in your mind, how's all this going to be funded? We'll get to that. Because that's going to be the things we are already doing, folks in diaspora that are already doing, and I'm going to explain what that means. And then in year 4 to 5, a national rollout. So truly by 2030, assuming this year is the first year, by 2030 we'll be in year 6. We'll have 10 million cameras in private hands, fully deployed. Capital expense of $500 million, a lot of money. 3.3 million apprentices. And then phase 4 would be the ongoing optimization, maintenance, subscriptions, analytics oversight. And the diagrams kind of describe that a little bit more. So the engagement model is, this is going to have to require citizens, see something, share something. So when 9/11 happened, New York came up with what they call see something, say something. In this context, it would be see something, share something. So share it with law enforcement, share it on social media. So these criminals are no longer faceless. People can actually attach faces to the names or to the crime. And then obviously having estates, markets, faith groups, churches, mosques, synagogues, if they have those in Nigeria, having those actually actively participate in this community engagement model. And then the diaspora community would actually be the ones crowdfunding this vision. And then having public-private partnerships in place with telcos, internet service providers, fintechs, privacy education, the startup community. Lagos State has probably one of the most vibrant startup communities in the US. Getting them involved, influencers, Nollywood, getting those folks involved in really owning our own destiny when it comes to safety and security of our beloved country. And then the governance around that, that's where folks like me come in, in my volunteer role as advisory board member for Lagos State government. We talk a lot about cybersecurity governance, privacy. We have a commissioner who's actually part of with the board, and we have a chair and we have board members, all very distinguished in their own rights. And we come up with, okay, what does cybersecurity look like for Lagos State? Lagos State just announced recently that it's going to be appointing the chief information security officer, and it'll be the first state in Nigeria to appoint one. That was part of my idea, right, for Lagos State. Like we could do all this advice, but we really need somebody that can roll up their sleeves, embedded within the Lagos State government that can actually drive the cybersecurity program. So having something like that for this type of national vision, I think is going to be very key. And making sure that that group or committee or whatever you want to call it, councils, actually they're plugged in directly to all these different, I'll say, aspects, the power issue, the privacy abuse issue, the corruption misuse issue, even things like people trying to vandalize those security cameras. I mean, you could try and destroy 10 million cameras. Good luck. But what I'm envisaging is the community truly owns this. Everybody sees the value. Everybody knows that this is there to protect them. And so that things don't keep getting worse. We have a level of control over our own destiny. And then the funding, obviously, that's going to come from public-private partnerships, corporate social responsibility, just to be able to diversify the sources of fund. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges is going to be the public mistrust. So, educating the public, leveraging influencers, again, Nollywood, the Nollywood community, community advisory boards, etc. All right, so I have 3 more slides to go, so I'm going to just quickly go over the slides. I think we're still within the 30 minutes. Okay, so coverage is 10 million cameras by year 6, making sure that there's at least 95% uptime in urban pilots, creating 3.3 million youth apprentices trained and employed. Safety, the metric will be reduction in more than 30% reduction in violent crime, whether it's in urban areas or rural areas across the country. That would be the number one metric. Obviously, the Nigerian police force, the National Bureau of Statistics would have to validate that, those metrics are being met. And then the funding, which I was going to save till the last, is going to come from the diaspora community. So currently, the diaspora community sends $20 billion with a B to Nigeria. That's a huge investment. So let's talk about that for a minute. I have some numbers here. Okay, some of this I've already talked about. So I'm going to skip this slide and maybe come up with it at the end. So according to the CBN, just trying to find that. Okay, so I may have to go back. So that number, it's very interesting. We looked at the stats from the UK, from the US, etc., and then we actually see a correlation between the inflow and the countries that have the highest camera to people ratio is actually where we're seeing the highest remittance flowing into Nigeria. So the US and the UK actually has the highest diaspora inflow into Nigeria. 50% of the entire 20.93 billion in 2024. This year would probably be higher. What does that tell you, guys? That tells you that the countries that folks like me and folks, I don't know if there's anyone in the UK here, live in, where we have more safety, more security, are actually the ones that are paying for the insecurity and the instability in Nigeria. Paying the most. Nigerians in those countries are paying the most for economic hardships. So, and the other thing they're paying more for is they're paying more to send that money to Nigeria. On average, they're paying something like 5%. So if I send $100 to Nigeria, I'm paying $5 in fees, one of the highest in the world. The UN SDP, I think that's what they call it, is 3%. That's the target. The cost of sending money should not be more than 3%. Nigerians like me in diaspora are paying more than 5%. Some banks are charging as much as 12%. So not only are we paying for the problem on the ground, we're also being penalized when we send money to solve the problem. Okay, so what would it look like if we spend 2.5% of that inflow on this vision? So 2.5% of that is $500 billion a year. And we probably don't even have to spend that money every year. So I think the solution lies in figuring out how we can reduce that cost of sending money, that remittance cost, and maybe volunteering or donating that smaller percent into funding this program. Now, I'm not advocating. I run a fund to do it. There are people who are maybe way more financially astute than me, and they probably have more skin in the game that can do it. But there's got to be a way to capture that inflow. First, for helping reduce the cost of sending money and diverting that whatever savings we can achieve from that, that remittance cost into actually funding this vision. So that's my vision. Like, that's what I feel like can at least put a dent on the state of insecurity in Nigeria. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back to you, Dr. Jumbo.
Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.
My name is Stephen Omabain. So I'm in the technology space and I'm based in the United States. Sorry, my apologies. My First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was very nice to be hearing this. Um, I've looked at some of the data and the statistics. For example, on the spending of the maybe the $50 per camera, buying it from the United States, and the uh, installation cost. I'm not sure. Can you elaborate a little bit? Because uh, in my role, I work as the head of a global IT organization, so I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I'm not sure whether there are also residual costs that has not been added, one, and two, why some of the installation camera is not manufactured in Nigeria, because that will, I know you're talking about the millions of jobs that could be created. That could generate 8 times the size of that number of people that can be employed in the country. So I'm trying to find out whether there are residual costs. For example, you have the equipment costs, the wiring costs.
Yeah.
So I am just wondering. I'm quite in support of what you're saying. And so, and when you talk about cybersecurity, there are also a little bit of the expertise that is also involved. So when I look at 3 cameras per person and the cost of additional equipment associated with those costs, so you are looking significantly at a much higher cost than anticipated from the presentation. So one
Yeah.
question I have
Mhm.
to focus the purchase or the building of the camera in Nigeria, because we have capable Nigerians that can volunteer to do that are already doing it, and to see whether that can be sourced and produced in Nigeria, and then the $50 will not be necessary. It will be concentrated in the country, even though you have to buy some of the components, but it can be built in Nigeria, and the components can be built in Nigeria. Then the second aspect is the expertise and the additional equipment that needs to be purchased, including wiring and the rest of them. I think those costs needs to be transparent enough to be factored in. So, what is your thought on that?
Great comments, great observation, great everything, Stephen. The $50 is just a rough capex cost. So that's just the initial cost of procuring the cameras. Like even if you were to order those cameras from the US, as an example, pick one Jumia, different platforms, Temu. That's just factoring in the cost of procuring the camera. It doesn't factor in the data cost. If you want to hook it up to the internet, it doesn't factor in the cloud storage cost. That's pretty much just to buy the equipment, the device. But that's to get us started, right? So that's not going to be the total cost of ownership,
Okay.
the TCO. Yeah, but it's to at least get those cameras in Nigeria, because there are offline options as well, right? There's cameras that you could put a SIM card in.
Mm-hmm.
I even have cameras here in the US. I live in a fairly wooded area, so I have trail cameras in my property, right? Because I like to watch wildlife, as an example. So some of those cameras may be offline, some of them may be online with cloud storage, etc. So does that kind of give you a sense? So this will be the starting point. This is not going to be the total cost, but I'm just saying the diaspora community, based on the $20 billion we're sending to Nigeria every year, if we can figure out a way to shave off that 2.5%. So let's say the average cost now was like 5% of sending money. If we somehow reduce that to 2% with the help of the CBN and all the powers that be, I may have the option. I would love to have the option to say, okay, I'm going to donate 2.5% to some sort of diaspora fund. They're actually talking about a $10 billion diaspora investment fund. I would personally say, yeah, every time I send money, I have the option to contribute to that fund. Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, 2.5% makes sense, as long as I'm not paying that in addition to the already high transfer cost I'm paying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just think that the total cost has to be factored. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a noble idea, but I think if you don't factor the cost, if people can see the cost, then this is where the transparency is not there because people read data a little bit differently. For me, for example, the way I read data, as the head of an IT organization, is different from how a layman will read data, right? So
Sure.
you have the bandwidth utilization data that needs to be factored in, and you have also those type of element composites of that cost needs to be broken down, so it becomes transparent.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
we just say it's $50, then it's really not $50. And then I always hate the idea of us going to US and China and buying this thing because we have really competent Nigerians that can design a
Mm,
simple camera
mm,
that can create thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs
mm.
in the country. So maybe we can start small. Is what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Start from a different framework where it is small,
Mm,
develop that smallness, increase that job profile within within that context, and then scale up from there. Before you know it, yes, you're right, 100% correct. That will be thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs
yeah.
created as a result. So that
Yeah.
is one area I thought we can focus on. And I like the idea of having the chief information security officer, which you're already part of within the country, because that's going to be very necessary
Well,
in building
just
that
to
framework.
clarify, I'm not part of that. It was just a
Oh, okay.
recommendation as an advisory
Oh,
board
okay,
member.
okay.
Yeah.
No, it's a good
Uh,
idea.
yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
excellent idea. I think
Right.
Nigeria is missing that quite a bit
Right.
in the technology space. I think it's a very good recommendation. But the question is,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to monopolize your discussion.
Absolutely. No, your points are very
So,
valid. But I think definitely to clarify, the capex cost of just procuring those cameras is
mm,
what I'm focusing on.
okay.
Purely based on what I know is flowing into the country. Like if we can at least start by funding those cameras, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
provided, manufactured, assembled locally or not, we can at least have those cameras on ground. Then the rest, I mean, like there's folks that literally could turn this into a viable business, right? And part of their business plan is, okay, how much does it actually cost to operate these cameras? How much does it cost to hire apprentices? How much does it cost to do storage, maybe local cloud storage instead of foreign, overseas cloud storage? So all those nuances and all those, like the last mile, could be figured out by folks on the ground. But my part is, let's tap into the money we're already sending to be part of the solution. So that's really where the initial division came from. Let's figure out a way to fund having more eyes on the ground. This is pretty much eyes on the ground. The camera serve as the eyes on the ground. Yeah.
Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.
I want to state something that I always applied as a philosophy. So I've been in leadership roles a lot. And I used to work, somebody's off mute. I think it's you, Stephen. So do you mind muting? Um, I used to work with this very smart guy at the Federal Reserve that said there are two ways to address a problem. You can admire that problem, and you could get so laser focused on how big the problem is, and you're going to get paralyzed. Or you can take the first step to be part of the solution. This is the first step. This is not the be all end all. So I'm not pitching this as, hey, we do this, we buy 10 million cameras or fund 10 million cameras. When I say we, folks in diaspora, suddenly all our problems are going to go away. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's take the first step. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with taking that first step. Take the first step, everything else would follow. Others will build upon that first step.
Say something. Nigeria, there's so much insecurity in this country at the moment. And I'm thinking of bringing in the police force and other security agencies to help navigate this great idea you're having. If they are not introduced into the whole idea, I hope it's not going to cause future problems because they might try to frustrate it and they might feel that maybe there's another part of group of people that are trying to penetrate the security space of the country. That's my idea. What do you think about that?
That's a problem that I think we could table for another. That's a whole separate discussion, right? So the security apparatus we have currently in Nigeria is not working. If it worked so well, what happened 2 weekends ago should never have happened. It not only is it a major embarrassment for us, especially professionals here, it's a slap on the face. So it's not working. So if they want to keep it the same way and just hope and pray it's going to go away, fine. But I'm saying if we're already funding the solution, right? And when I say funding the solution, is all these remittances going into Nigeria to soften the economic hardships. If we're already doing it, let's put our money. We're already putting our money where our mouth is. Folks in diaspora, me included, right? Because I don't do regular transfers, but I do transfers every now and then. Why don't we take ownership? And when I say ownership, why don't we channel what money we're already spending to actually find that solution? Now, how we're going to engage them, I mean, that's part of my pitch. Like, we need to get the Nigerian police force involved, the National Bureau of Statistics. But quite frankly, if this is a private sector-led initiative, everybody in Nigeria now has a phone, from what I hear, almost everybody. Some people have 2 or 3 phones, almost everyone. There may be places where they can't afford phones of situations, but everybody now has a film studio on their hands. You could literally take a video and that video can go viral in seconds if you have data and if it works, right? What I'm really trying to say is the solution, the technologies are already out there. Like, I think the cat's already left the station. Like, okay, if they don't get on board, like, what better option do they have? Like, what other solution are they proposing? We've had about CCTV systems for the federal capital. I think it was $250,000, $500 million, $250 million budget to install solar-powered CCTVs in Abuja that went nowhere, right? Yeah. So we've already seen solutions that has come from government not work, and that's why we're advocating a private sector-led solution with their support. So I have to caveat that with their support. How we get the support, I really don't know. But maybe I'll be counting on you all to be the advocates to say, okay, yeah, somebody we can talk to, let's talk to the individual. Let's explain what we're really trying to do. So Taiye, hopefully that answers your questions in a long-winded way.
Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.
I'm just scrolling up. Okay, there was a question from SSDEL LLC. Can you please type change it to like your real name? Because we're also trying to get a track of who's we're talking to and who's fielding those questions. So standing on existing protocol, you don't have to, by the way. Permit me to ask, who would own the infrastructure? Is it a diaspora ownership or give back to the country? What is the operational cost to keep the project running? Again, this is the private sector led. These are private security cameras. The ones that we have in most parts of the West are owned by us. I use a product called Ring, and I've been a big fan since the founder went on Shark Tank. So I've been in touch with the founder for a while, and then Amazon acquired them. Within the Ring network, we have a Ring neighborhood where we actually share videos with each other, right? So if you have the Ring app and you have Ring cameras, you could actually share videos of suspicious activity, different things using the neighborhood feature, which is within the app. So I envisage something like that for the Nigerian market, and it doesn't have to be Ring, could be any other thing, or it could be a homegrown app, right? But I think it's important that it's owned, it's in private hands. So if we think about, the old Nitel, when I remember having to make phone calls, literally go into a phone booth at Nitel, but service was so bad, the quality of service was horrible, right? to make calls, especially outside, international calls. Now, the GSM licenses got allocated, and that opened up everything. Quality of service is still relatively bad, but at least now we have other options than going to a Nitel phone booth and being extorted, pretty much. So I think it needs to be a private sector owned. And when I say private sector, I really mean citizen owned. And then maybe having the startup community innovate, things like apps, and stuff like that, especially the folks in Lagos and other parts of the country where they're doing some amazing stuff in the startup community. The diaspora ownership is really more about us helping to fund, leveraging this reduction in our remittance fees or cost. So if we can get our remittance cost lower, my thinking is maybe there's a fund they create to capture that 2.5% that we need to fund the capex for these cameras. So I don't know if I made sense. Next question from Taiye. How do we maintain these cameras, training and continual training? That all has to be done on the ground, Taiye. I think there's enough smart people and enough entrepreneurial people in Nigeria to figure all that out. But I feel like the diaspora community could be heavily involved. I'm part of a group here, shout out to Dr. Adie, called the Nigerian USIT Network. We have some of the brightest minds in technology. That's where I met Dr. Jumbo in the US that are part of this network. It was founded here in Atlanta by Dr. Adie. I've been involved for at least 4 or 5 years, Dr. Adie. So having some sort of partnership between groups like NIGUSIT, NIGUSIT. So if you want to go to nigusit.org, or somebody could just help me type it into the chat. Having those types of collaboration, maybe the Diaspora Commission, I've forgotten, NIDCOM, I think it's called, having those types of partnerships for technology transfer, training, etc., I think could be very helpful. And then the last question I see here is, considering the new tax law coming into place, do you think the Nigerian government would be willing to share the proposed shared remittance? What's your reasoning on this? I really don't know about the new Nigeria tax law. I'm sorry. So would you like to educate us on that? First of all, start with what's your name and where you're from, where you're located.
Okay. So good evening to the team. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. My name is Pere Anthony, presently domiciled in Nigeria. So I'm giving you real-time information considering what we know in Nigeria. So the tax law is going to set in by January 2026. So based on the proposed tax law, remittance from capital gains within Nigeria and outside Nigeria, right, will be taxed. So the premium is whatever amount of money that is domiciled in your account. If it's more than 800,000 naira, so it's going to be taxed. So when you're going to be doing remittance to Nigeria, so you have to be able to prove that you've been able to pay tax from the country where you're sending money to Nigeria. When that is done, you have to show document to the FRS for them not to double tax you again. But if those documentation is missing, automatically you start getting things like 15%. The highest you would pay in Nigeria presently right now is about 24%. So the idea about the tax law is they are looking for how to get more money. So in your conversation, you were looking at, in terms of remittance charges, for them to be able to slash down from the 5% to about 2.5%. I think it's going to be a tough one, but it demands that you have to talk. This would demand talking to the presidency and the guys in CBN to see how they can shift grounds. But the idea is they need more money as if there's no tomorrow. So having said that, that's an insight I want the board or the team or the committee around this to factor in, such that we're moving from the point where every leaked funds, as proposed by the present government, the term used is leaked funds, has to be captured with all sense of responsibility without letting a kobo go out. So that's the basic insights I could share for now. Probably if the team needs the tax bill, I can attach it for people to read through to understand what it is. Thank you.
Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.
So I'm a project manager, so we've worked around capital projects, so we try to consider every tax policy and regime that is coming in. So we've done an extensive review, but I think it would be nice if I share the document for everybody, or probably if there's a lawyer in here, to interpret it to their best knowledge.
Yes, please do so. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
if you can, if there's a link, there's a link you can provide in the chat, that would be helpful. But thanks for that. I wasn't aware of that. So I'm just wondering how much of an impact that's going to have on the remittances from diaspora. I don't see it helping.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that's something we need to talk about in a separate
On a separate webinar.
That's a separate conversation for sure.
Yeah. All right. So, Sandra, please go ahead. We have, I think we have like a few minutes to conclude.
I'm Sandra by name. I'm watching from Norway. I didn't really understand what he meant about when you have a certain amount in the account, you got to pay tax and all that. I didn't really understand. Can he please try to explain? Because it was breaking in between. Thanks.
Caveat, ma. I don't want to act as a tax consultant or as a lawyer. I would do it. I'll do it well if I attach the document. You could share with your tax consultant or your lawyer to best interpret the document to suit your position. But primarily, what I've said is this: the incoming tax says that money, personal income tax, people start paying personal income tax in Nigeria from 2026 January. So if the threshold of the money in your account annually is more than 800,000, yeah, they will start charging you tax on that. So the first threshold is around from 800 to 2.2 million naira. So you'll be charged about 15%. So if it goes more than 2.2 million, so maybe like about 5 million, so it increased to about 15% personal income tax. So primarily, that's just the breakdown. They have a range. The range is from zero. If you're within 800,000 annually, money in your account, you're going to be charged zero personal income tax. The moment the money exceeds 800,000, they'll start charging you tax annually.
Well, Anthony, thank you so much for the explanation. I think that is going to be the next webinar that we should have, so that people in diaspora will definitely understand exactly what is going on with this tax. So maybe if you can stay behind, maybe we can talk about something before you leave. But thank you so much for trying to explain that. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Taiye, Mr. Lambo, for such a wonderful presentation. It's an eye-opener. It's something that is definitely very crucial that we'll have to go back and think about. Probably he will also go back and do a little more research, and maybe we can take another pass at this. And also want to especially thank you for joining. Please stay tuned and continue to listen to the Adie Talk Radio. If you go to Adie Talk, www.adietalk.com, you will definitely find the online radio where you can listen to us 24/7. And we're going to continue to bring wonderful discussion like this for Nigerians and Africans in diaspora. Thank you for logging in.
Adie Talk Radio, connecting you to Africa. Your stories, your sound.